Mrs. Ansbacher, are you in the room? Is Mrs. Ansbacher here? Okay, hold on. Let me find. Where are you? Mrs. Ansbacher, are you here in the room? She was here, but I know where she went. Okay. Oh, you're here. Hi. We have a space for you here if you'd like. We have reserved a place for you here. Would you like to? Whatever you feel comfortable with. Hi. Wow. This is, if I counted right, the 12th year that we are meeting. I'm from English, not from math, so I can't swear that I counted right, but that's what I calculated. So this is our bat mitzvah year. Wow. Okay. Birshut HaRabbanim, Professor Katz, President of Michlala Yerushalayim, Devorah Rosenwasser, who surprised us. She just got back from America. Devorah Rosenwasser, she is the Dean of Michlala Yerushalayim. My colleagues, students, and honored guests, I welcome you to the Mrs. Rose Stark Alaha Shalom Memorial Evening. I'm Dr. Emmy Leah Zitter, head of Michlala's English department and moderator of this event. That's Mrs. Stark. Mrs. Stark was an Auschwitz survivor who lost her young husband and her infant son, her parents and her parents-in-law, 3 sisters and their families, all in one night. She survived her year in Auschwitz, slave labor in salt mines, and death marches. And she went on to rebuild a family. She rebuilt with my father. She rebuilt my family, my 2 sisters, and myself. That's her carrying my, at the time, 2-day-old granddaughter, Moria. All my kids who had children in Yerushalayim, their first stop was always at Bobby's house. During her lifetime, my mother spoke from this very stage about her experiences, sharing the horror, but always focusing on the strength of our people and their faith in Hashem. She always began by thanking the audience for taking time to come. I think she would give special thanks to you all tonight, since this is, as far as I remember, the first time we've scheduled the evening after Purim, just 3 weeks before Pesach, the busiest time of year. Someone came over to me and said, "You make it a little later every year." And I said, "Next year, Erev Pesach, we'll see what happens." Stop. Our theme tonight is Strength in Shabbat, Hope in the Holidays, V'hi She'amda Lavotenu V'lanu. And even though you might not return home tonight with a cleaned out closet or resorted bookshelf, I hope some of the stories and songs and ideas you hear tonight will actually come home with you to enrich your Pesach Seder table. Tonight, we'll be hearing a lot about the Jewish calendar. And this time of year is so appropriate for an event like this. Just a week and a half ago, we ushered in Purim by reading Parshat Zachar. We're commanded to remember what Amalek did to us. And tonight we remember that Amalek has not yet been wiped out. We recall the Amalek of 70 years ago, and sadly, we recall the Amalek who is still our enemy today. Just days ago, we celebrated Purim and Shushan Purim. When we read the Megillah, we remembered a time when Hashem seemed hidden from us, so far away, when his name was not even mentioned. A time of Hester Panim, a time like the years of the Holocaust, when again Hashem seemed so far away. And tonight we will also remember the Mordechais and the Esthers of the 20th century, those whose faith in Hashem, even during the darkest day, never wavered. My grandmother Malka, Hashem Yikom Dama, used to say, Yiddish speakers, get ready, Atuk noch Purim is Erev Pesach. Pesach, sorry. Okay. I'm sorry, Litvaks, it's a Hungarian Yiddish. That's what we spoke. A day after Purim is Erev Pesach. And in terms of our Pesach preparations, of course, she was absolutely right. But in the chronology of Jewish history and in our Jewish calendar, it's actually the opposite. Pesach comes before Purim. Pesach is in Nisan, the first month. Purim is in Adar, the last. On Pesach, Hashem bichvodo uva'atzmo, with nisim gluyim, with open miracles, showed his hand in history and his love for his people. Perhaps the memory of that crystal clear connection between Hashem and his nation, a memory that we transmit, know that we're supposed to relive every year at the Pesach Seder, gave our people the strength to make faith possible when his hand was hidden, whether it was in Shushan or whether it was in Auschwitz. V'hi sha'amda lavotenu, that which held up our fathers and held up my mother through the darkest days, that which kept our people strong when lo achad bilvad amad aleinu l'chalotenu, when our enemies tried to destroy us, was the memory of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's hand, so to speak, that saved us from our enemies' hands and continues to save us, matzilenu miyadam, today. And now it is my pleasure to ask Professor Katz, President of Michala, to open the evening. Are you going to want to say something? Oh, okay.
Good evening to everyone. I'm Dr. Emi Zitter, Rabbanit Farbstein, the head of the English department, and Rabbanit Farbstein, the head of the Shoah Studies Department Center, who, as they may have said, have had a partnership of 12 years in running a program, usually before Purim, but now closer to Pesach. But in my opinion, the link between the study of an academic subject in the Michala and the study of the Shoah, which is perhaps the greatest catastrophe that occurred in Jewish history, not only modern Jewish history, but throughout the years, ever since Avraham Avinu became the first Ivri. And we take into consideration the fact that without recognition and remembrance, then there's very little left to Jewish identity. These days we use a number of words to try and emphasize the fact that Jews all over the world agree on certain issues. We talk about shalom, peace. I'm not sure that there is any agreement as how to make peace within the Jewish world. We talk about unity. I'm not quite sure that there is unity, and we're not sure how we are going to make unity in the Jewish world. But when we talk about the Shoah, from left to right, from north to south, whoever you are, however you define yourself as a Jew, the Shoah is something that is completely identifiable by every single Jew, whatever their conviction, whatever their belief, whatever their stream, their denomination. And the fact that we have in this room senior citizens and young girls from the Machal program who are here to hear about the experiences of the Jewish calendar during the Shoah, during the darkest hours of Jewish history, indicates how it's a magnet that draws everyone together in order to remember and make sure that never again. I welcome you all. I congratulate the organizers and hope that you have a fruitful evening.
Thank you, Professor Katz. Okay, where are we at? Okay, so I said that this is our bat mitzvah year, so to speak. And, you know, at bat mitzvah, you start thinking about when the baby was first born. I was thinking about the first time we met. And we had a speaker then who spoke. He was very upset. He was very upset about the way the Shoah was studied in the academic world, and he included Yad Vashem in his criticism. He said they were not focusing on religion, religious Jews, faith, and when I said that it wasn't in the conversation. 12 years later, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's in the conversation now. Maybe not in the exact way we would like, maybe not as much as we would like, but even at Yad Vashem, this is being talked about. If there is one person who is largely responsible for this, I think it is Rebbetzin Esther Farbstein, who's the head of Mischala's Center for Holocaust Studies. It has been my great privilege to work with her all these years in organizing this evening. She's a woman of an amazing strength and vision, and that vision has grown, and it has changed the way the academic world sees the Shoah. Esther, would you come up?
שלום, ערב טוב. תודה לאמי על הדברים החמים שלה. הלוואי שהיו כולם נכונים, אבל יש עוד זמן, בעזרת השם. אני רוצה להזכיר שאנחנו עומדים גם בעברית, ברכה אחת בעברית, לא נורא. אני רוצה להזכיר שאנחנו גם ערב פרשת החודש, כן? עוד מעט, עוד שבת וחצי, עוד שבוע וחצי, אנחנו בפרשת החודש. ופרשת החודש אומרת לנו הרבה מאוד על הכוח של הזמן היהודי, על ההתחדשות של הזמן היהודי, על היכולת שלנו לקחת מכל תקופה בשנה כוח מסוים מאוד, חשוב מאוד, כמו ויטמין של אותו זמן, ויטמין רוחני שעוזר לנו לעבור את השנה. ועל הנושא הזה מרבה לדבר הפחד יצחק, הרב יצחק קוטנר. רק רציתי להזכיר את זה, כי להתחדש פירוש הדבר להבין את המשמעות של הזמן, ומתוך המשמעות של הזמן לקחת את הכוח להמשך, את כוח החירות מפסח, את כוח הביטחון מסוכות, כוח השמחה מפורים ועוד ועוד. אחד הדברים שנוטלים את החירות של האדם זה כאשר הוא מאבד את הממד של הזמן. ואנחנו יודעים את זה חלילה אצל אנשים חולים שלא יודעים בין היום למחר. אנחנו מכירים את זה אצל תינוקות שטרם בגרו, ואדם לא יכול לקבל החלטות כשאין לו הממד של הזמן. ויש מניצולי השואה שתיארו מצב שהם איבדו את הממד של הזמן. פרימו לוי מתאר באחת הפרקים הראשונים שלו, בספר מהו אדם, הוא אומר, מהרגע שנכנסתי למחנה הרגשתי שאני מאבד את ממד הזמן, וזה חיזק בתוכו את תחושת העבדות. הוא אומר, לא היה לי לוח, לא היה לי תאריך, ידעתי מתי יום ומתי לילה לפי האור והחושך, מתי חורף ומתי קיץ, אבל התחושה הזאת שכל יום הוא כמו משנהו, ואין משמעות לזמן ואין עצירה בזמנים, יצרה לי תחושה קשה של עבדות. אבל לעומת זאת, אנחנו מכירים הרבה מאוד יהודים, ותגידו לי אתם, כל מי שקרא ספר של ניצול שואה, יודע שברוב רובם של המקרים הם אומרים, זה היה לפני פסח, אחרי פסח, בראש השנה, בשבועות, הם משתמשים כל הזמן בזמן היהודי, ואנחנו יודעים עד כמה הם נאבקו לזכור את העם היהודי. זה הנושא שבו בחרנו. איך הם בחרו לדעת את הזמן, ומה הזמן נתן להם. זה נושא שאנחנו עובדים עליו הרבה, ודוקטור אלן רוזן המומחה יביא לכם חלק מהמחקר על זה. אני רוצה לסיים שהשבוע ביקרתי אצל אחד הניצולים, דוקטור יוסף קליינמן, יהודי יקר מאוד מאוד שגר בקריית משה בירושלים. ביקרתי אותו עם חוקר שלא הכיר אותו, והחוקר שאל אותו, איך ידעתם מתי ראש השנה? הוא ענה תשובה ברורה, ואת זה שמעתי מהרבה ניצולים. מה פירוש איך לא ידענו? מה פירוש איך לא ידענו? כל אחד שבא למחנה, השאלה הראשונה ששאלנו אותו היה, מה בדיוק היום? הוא השיב בשאלה, כי היה ברור ליהודים האלה שלדעת את הזמן זה לקבל כוח מהזמן, זה להתחדש מהזמן ולקחת ממנו צידה לדרך. אני מודה לאמי שנתנה את ההזדמנות, אני מודה לניצולים שבינינו, בעיקר לגברת סופי סולברג, שהיא באמת אורחת הכבוד כאן למרות מצבה הלא פשוט, למרצים היקרים, למשפחת אנסבכר היקרה שאנחנו היינו איתה ואנחנו רוצים גם ממנה שאבנו, ואנחנו רוצים לשאוב כוחות גם ממנה וגם לחזק אותה, ומאחלת לכם ערב מעשיר ומחדש. כל טוב.
And that concludes the Hebrew portion of our program. Thank you, Esther. I wasn't going to mention this, but my mother's picture is still there. And I have two stories about my mother in terms of the Jewish calendar, of the calendar. We'll start with the non-Jewish calendar. My mother always said it was at the end of her year. I don't know if it was in Auschwitz or Bergen-Belsen or maybe on the death march. I don't know exactly where it happened. And she said that there was an announcement made. The Nazis made an announcement. And they said, today is April 12th. This is a great day that will always be remembered in history. Today, the President of the United States, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, died. And if you Google it, you will find he died on April 12th, 1945. And my mother always told us that she thought to herself, oh, it's my birthday. My mother's birthday was April 12th. So she didn't really have the sense of the secular calendar, apparently. But she also had her story about Yom Kippur in Auschwitz. I'll just tell it to you very, very briefly. I think it was from the men's, right? Am I getting the story right? The men's sides, they shouted out to the women's side, Kinder, tomorrow is Yom Kippur. And my mother always said that everybody, people who before the war had not fasted on Yom Kippur, they all refused their rations that day. Right. Yom Kippur, April, she only found out just by that coincidence. But Yom Kippur, somehow they found out and they kept it. Okay, we're going to now, there's no room here. We have a film clip of, Esther mentioned that Mrs. Sophie Solberg is here. Mrs. Solberg is an Auschwitz survivor. You will hear a lot of her story from Dr. Avraham Rosen. We'll start with the clip, right? We're going to start with a clip where she tells her story. She speaks Hebrew, but there are English subtitles. And then Dr. Rosen will continue and expand on her story. Okay, tech support. Are you ready? Okay. Okay, let's see. Pesach. This is it, right? No. It's
In הגעת לאושוויץ בליל הסדר?
ביום טוב ראשון. ליל הסדר חגגנו.
Hold on. Is it loud enough? Okay. Tech support. I need full screen and volume. Who's going to help me here? This is full screen? Okay. And so where's volume? Is here. Okay. The volume is 100. Here. Is there another volume? Okay, if we're very quiet and read the Ktuviot if you're in the back.
בקרון הרכבת לאושוויץ, ושם גם כן לפני ששלחו אותנו, אנחנו ידענו שישלחו אותנו לאושוויץ. ידענו את זה כמה שבועות מראש, אנחנו לא נבהלנו מזה, אף אחד לא ידע מה זה אושוויץ. אמרו שזה מחנה עבודה ומחנה מעבר למחנות העבודה האחרות. שזה מחנה מעבר לעולם הבא, זה אף אחד לא חלם על זה. ואז ידענו שזה בסביבת פסח, אז עשינו שוב מצות. פעם רק זית לכל אחד, ולקחנו את זה איתנו, וזה מה שהיה לנו בתוך הרכבת, ושם ניהלנו סדר. אני גם יותר מדי לא זוכרת משם, רק שהיה חושך. זה היה קרונות כאלה של בהמות, הם בלי חלונות, למעלה איזה אשנבים, וחוץ מזה זה היה לילה. אבל איכשהו כנראה בכל זאת ראינו משהו, כי בהגדות לקחנו. זהו, וניהלנו סדר של ממש שם.
איך ידעת כל שנה שזה התאריך של פסח?
שזה התאריך שעשיתי לוח פעמיים. את הראשון גנבו לי.
את ידעת את הכללים של הלוח העברי?
למדתי את זה בגיל 10 בבית ספר. ולא ידעתי, חוץ רק ידעתי את הסדר של שנים מעוברות, וידעתי ועשיתי לי חשבון באיזה שנה אנחנו עומדים, וידעתי שהשנה שנשלחנו לאושוויץ הייתה שנה מעוברת, כי הוריי נהרגו באדר א', והם נהרגו מהפצצת אוויר. ואחר כך, אז את רוב הדברים ידעתי, וידעתי את מספר הימים של החודשים, וידעתי שחשוון וכסלו שזה לא קבוע, אבל מישהי קיבלה איזו גלויה ממישהו בחוץ למחנה עם תאריך יהודי וגויי, ואחרי מזה יכולתי ללמוד את מספר הימים של חשוון וכסלו. קיבלה את זה בסוף כסלו או משהו כזה, אז בכל אופן, או בטבת, בכל אופן מזה יכולתי לדעת את מספר הימים בשנה השנייה, אז עשיתי, מה שטעיתי זה רק בסדר הפרשיות. חיברתי תרומות לצווה, ומזה יצא איזה בלבול, וזה לא יכול להיות אף פעם ביחד. אבל חוץ מזה, מבחינת התאריך, לא טעיתי.
Let's go. go back to this. Hold on. All right. Okay, let's just introduce. Okay. That was quite a remarkable clip of a very remarkable woman. We will introduce her more in a few minutes, and we'll hear more about this story. I don't know about you. Do you know what I found the most amazing? These people were taken from their homes, their families. They couldn't carry much with them, but they brought their Haggadahs. It was Pesach. They brought their Haggadahs. Okay, now, I first met Dr. Avram Rosen many years ago when we were both reasonably new olim and young lecturers together at Bar Ilan University. We shared an office. At that time, I was impressed with how he managed to balance serious scholarship with deep feeling. It's not always simple. Since then, he has continued to bring his faith in Hashem and his love for the Jewish people to his academic study of our nation's painful losses and incredible strength. Most recently, he has published a book about calendars in the Shoah, and here he is to talk about that. Oh, do you need to put stuff on?
If we could do it in an easy way.
Okay, who's here to help? Tech support. Somebody under 20, let's go. Oh, Nachum. Okay. Thank you.
Son.
That's my son.
Yeah.
He's not under 20.
He's not under 20. He's about 40, right?
What would you like to put on?
So I have a disc on key here, but we need to kind of scroll down to get. Okay. So we keep going down. We'll say calendar. We'll get slowly. Where'd we go? It should say calendar. It's there, right there.
One or two?
No, one. Yep. Good. Great. Okay.
Give it 1 second and see if it opens.
No, it's not responding. Okay. If it doesn't come on, don't worry about it.
I would give it 1 more minute, and if it doesn't go.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. That's an idea. Yeah.
Sorry, 1 second.
What do you need?
I'm going to take the mic and mouse.
You need to take the what?
Mouse.
Okay. Sophie Zollberg, who we're privileged to have with us here tonight, was born in Munich, Germany in 1923. She went to school in Munich, to a religious school with excellent teachers who had been trained at the famous Würzburg Academy, and learned a great deal, including, as we heard, how to make a calendar according to the rules of calendar making. She never made a calendar at the time, as she conveyed to me, but the rules were there and drilled into the students by her teacher, Julius Kissinger. Kissinger, a relative of the famous Henry, who was her teacher in several years, and from whom she heard lessons on the calendar, but on much else as well. Her family moved from Munich to Berlin just after Kristallnacht. She went to school there for a short time, then had to drop out of school, as the Jews of Germany generally did. In 1941, she was able to go to a Hakshara, Zionist training camp, outside of Berlin called Neuendorf, and was there in the middle of Germany from 1941 to 1943, laboring on various projects that they were assigned, but was able, with the other approximately 25 religious young people there, was able to keep Shabbos every week in the middle of Germany in 1943, and that, as she tells us, was the reason why she desired to go there. As we heard in this remarkable clip on the Erev Pesach, Tavshin Gimel, 1943, they had already been moved to a deportation site, were then put on trains and deported to Auschwitz. On that same day, about 500 kilometers to the east, took place the beginnings of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. Very same time. She arrived in Auschwitz, was first assigned to be in Birkenau, the death camp site of Auschwitz, but in an extraordinary series of events, was able to find her way, through the help of a friend, to Auschwitz I, where she worked in the laundry, doing the clothes, if you can imagine this, doing the clothes of the SS, laundering them. But at the same time, there was better food, they were able to wash, there were no selections, and they were able to observe in some rudimentary fashion Shabbos and Chagim, and which is the overall theme of our night, in which she, Sophie Zolberg, made her calendars for Tavshin Daled, Tavshin Hey, 2 years in sequence, in order that she, but also the other 100 women in what was called the Stabsgebäude, the place of working for the enemy, that they could observe the Chagim. There was one extraordinary passage in Sophie Zolberg's account that she wrote up at my behest to help me with my research, where she talks about one of her colleagues there who for the first time learned in Auschwitz that there was such a thing as the existence of a Jewish year. The existence of a Jewish year. That's the kind of revelation that she brought. She and the other women there were forced in Tevet of Tavshin Hey, January 1945, to leave Auschwitz and go on a death march. She reports that before they left, a group of these women got together and said, as a group, Tefillas Haderech, which she then says, never before and never after did I say that tefillah with the passion I did on that night. They went then to a labor camp and eventually were liberated, but they had to avoid the incoming Russian troops who were bent on taking revenge against Germans. They disguised themselves as French and succeeded, and eventually she was able to come in that same year, arriving on Rosh Hashanah in Eretz Yisrael, where she is lived ever since. The calendar that she made for Tavshin Hay remains in a jewelry-like box, together with a small siddur she had in Auschwitz, and the French flags that she and the other women wore on their lapels to disguise themselves as French after the war. The question still is with us, however. How can someone, 20-year-old woman, make a Jewish calendar in Auschwitz? If we took the Rebbeim in the city, great as they are, and put them down in a room without Sifrei Kodesh, without consultants, most would likely, I have heard from them, not be able to compose a calendar. It takes research, it takes corroboration. Yet she was able to do this. And we'll come back shortly to what gave in addition to what she's told us so far, what gave the possibility of creating such a calendar. There were something on the order that I found, some 40 other Jewish calendars made across Europe by Jews under difficult circumstances. And that's what I'd like to share just a taste of with you tonight in honor of this very special occasion. But before I do, of course, Hakaras Tov, thanks to Dr. Zitter and to Rebbetzin Farbstein, to Rabbi Katz, Professor Katz, to the Mikvela for hosting such a remarkable evening that has a turnout of this kind in the month of Adar, the month where we hear Misha Niknas Adar Marbim B'Simcha, and so many people come to share stories of such a difficult period, which means that we have to go that much more distance to be able to make sure that our learning tonight and the commemorations tonight, which includes that of Ori Ansbacher, Aliyah Shalom Hayad, and of Mrs. Stark, Leah Shalom, that all of that has to be done somehow with joy, with simcha. It's a mandate that we have. And of course, my great thanks to Geveret Zolberg for making the trip in from Kiryat Sefer to be here, to be present, to be an inspiration. And my work would not be if it were not for her. And her generosity, her perseverance, and her inspiration. Some 40 calendars. And I'll just really tease out highlights. They were made in hiding. They were made in ghettos. They were made in concentration camps, as we've heard. In hiding, those include calendars made for 2 successive years, Tafshin Gimel, Tafshin Daled, by Rabbi Yoshua Neuvert Zatzal, who as a teenager, the age of Anne Frank, who's that well known, but Rabbi Norworth was with his family hiding in an Amsterdam apartment, took upon himself with virtually few resources to make calendars for those years. One of the remarkable things about these calendars is that the dates of the week are written Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Daled, Hey, Vav, and when it comes to the 7th day, every time it's written Shabbos, presaging his own work in bringing Shabbos to us in a deeper, greater way. Also in hiding were calendars made by Rabbi Shiner, who was hid by an employee in the middle of Poland, who were in a bunker with almost no light. There was a light coming through the window. He would hold up the copybook and make his inscriptions in the calendar according to what he could see with that light. For those of you that were able to get the flyer, that calendar that's on the cover of my book is Rabbi Shiner's calendar. He also, if you look on that flyer, I'm sorry that we couldn't bring it up here now, he color codes the calendar with red and sometimes half red to indicate what a Chag is, what Shabbos is, done in Polish, done in Yiddish, done in Hebrew. He also, so remarkably, highlights also the Christian days, Christian holy days, which I found no other calendar. Why? Because I would guess, I did not hear this from him directly, but I would guess because he was being hid by these Christians who supplied him with all of his needs and allowed, in the middle of Poland in a war that destroyed most all of Polish Jewry, for the whole family to survive. And he felt Hakras Tov, and if they would look on the calendar, I think he would want them to see it. Virtually every calendar of these 40 that I found that was made includes not only the Jewish calendar, but the Gregorian calendar. And in a way, we take that for granted. That's the Jewish calendar that we're used to. But remembering that the Jewish world was completely under assault by the non-Jewish world at this time. The world had caved in. And to put the Gregorian calendar there already says that we refuse to be divorced from this world. We refuse to be severed from it. We stay connected in spite of what you want to tell us. There's one absolutely astonishing example of this done by, we don't know the name of this calendar maker, who took what was called a Kodak pocket companion calendar, a Gregorian calendar of 1939, distributed at Kodak booths. Kodak, the filmmaker, Rochester, New York, yes, that he took this, and for the year 19 Tufshin Dalet, he inserted a Jewish calendar in the interstices of that Gregorian calendar. And that was still, in a way, facing on every day of that Gregorian calendar, as the Polish calendars do, have a Catholic saint. And he remained oblivious to it, and what mattered was Rosh Chodesh would be there every time. His calendar also served as a kind of a log where he recorded the unfortunate events of Jews being massacred in his surroundings, and attempted to not let them remain anonymous, but rather scripted their names in the within the calendar itself, so that they would have a yahrzeit, they would have a day of memory, they would not remain obscure. The whole notion of the existence of the Jewish calendar was something that is something that, as Dr. Zitter mentioned, most of the world that studies the Holocaust is not cognizant of it all. Meaning it's only the Gregorian calendar that serves to date events, and our work, Rebbetzin Farbstein's and others of us, try to return to the reality of the Holocaust, where the Jews were perceiving every day, every event, every occasion according to the Jewish calendar. And if one wants to retrieve the reality of the Jewish experience during that year, one needs to bring this into play. This we also find in diaries. Maybe some of you have read diaries written by those who were in the Holocaust. A particularly strong example is that of Moshe Flinker, a Dutch boy, one of 7 children, who, with his family, hid in Belgium, Brussels, and he wrote, unbeknownst to his family, a calendar for the year 1943-1944, Tavshin Gimel, Tavshin Dalet. He started off dating the calendar dating the diary according to both the Gregorian and the Jewish calendar. For the next 6 weeks, only the Gregorian calendar. And then he switched to the Jewish calendar, and that's what he dated the diary by for the rest of something on the order of 9 months. Uncannily, the switch when he moved from one to the other was done on January 1st. In other words, Moshe Flinker was saying, the world celebrates a January 1st, but it's exactly at that point that I'm going to enter completely into a Jewish universe and date according to Kaf Dalet Tevet, the 24th day of Tevet, and that's the world in which my diary and I and all that I experience will for hitherto be reported and recorded. He, unfortunately, together with his parents, were murdered during the time of the Shoah. But the notebooks, these great notebooks written in with a luminous Hebrew, as he sat in his Brussels apartment, survive and are available to us today. Shabbos Chagim, that's, of course, at the top of the list. But as we draw toward the conclusion, that I want to mention that the real Chiddush of the Jewish calendar during the war are fast days. Fast days. Every Jewish calendar, written, composed during the war, in ghettos, in hiding, and in camps, records the fast days. How can it be? The rations that were available to most Jews during this time were such as they would not be required according to halakha, the fast. And many did not. But the calendars, as my colleague Dr. Kaplan has said, the calendars, even if the Jews were not able to fast, the calendars that they made were able to keep those fast days. There are 2 examples of calendars that don't have a Gregorian counterpart. One was phenomenally painted by Hilda Zadokov in Theresienstadt, and the other was a calendar made by the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe and his son-in-law, who became the next, which is known as Hayom Yom, which is only a Jewish calendar. And again, even though it's not said explicitly, I think the statement that was made was, at this time, there's no spiritual room for anything, as they were seeing the events of the present and hopefully the redemption of the future. Nothing available except for the spiritual space of the Jewish calendar. So we return to the question, how could Geweret Zollberg, 20 years old, imprisoned in Auschwitz, make a calendar for these 2 years? Phenomenal. And we heard already a hint of that. That this teacher, Julius Kissinger, drilled the rules in. to such a degree that they became part of who she was. He was a teacher that she then adopted teaching methods from him. They were so deep that even in the depths of the oppressive existence in Auschwitz, or maybe especially there, these became available to her. And it was through his belief that students who were 10 years old could master the rudiments of a Jewish calendar, that she could do this and provide for her colleagues and friends in Auschwitz to observe Shabbos and Chagim. The amazing compliment that is that Julius Kissinger could not get out of Germany, was trapped. And he, together with all the Jews of Munich, were deported in fall of 1941, supposedly to Riga, but the train was diverted to Kovno, and he, his wife, his 2 children, his brother, his wife, and the rest of the Jews on the train were murdered at the 9th Fort in Kislev of Tufshin base, 1941. So as she was making these calendars, he was no longer in this world, seemingly, but he was. He was there, guiding not only her, but guiding every woman in the Stabsgebäude to observe the holidays. His merit was being produced and intensified with every Shabbos, every Chag. And it was through the research that I did that I found out that the day he actually perished was Hay Kislev. And now, Geweret Zollberg, as a student who reveres their teacher, lights a yahrzeit candle in his memory on that day. And it seems as we commemorate, celebrate in the Mikvah, a place of great teaching, great learning, that the lessons are quite apparent of how we have to set the highest standards to teach, not only for testing, not only for tomorrow, but for a decade or 2 decades, and how those will influence not only the student we teach, but their family, their friends, and the Jewish people at large. Thank you very much.
Wow. Thank you, Dr. Rosen. Something I neglected to say, but since you were talking about teachers, I neglected to mention that Dr. Rosen did his dissertation. Is that right? You studied with Elie Wiesel. And perhaps it was from him that you learned how to combine the dispassionate objectivity and thoroughness that a scholar needs with the passion that a scholar of the Shoah needs. Beautiful. Thank you. Now, Esther, okay, we would like to invite now Mrs. Sophie Solberg to give a bracha. We'll see if she's up to it. She is, as you can see, she's
תודה רבה לדוקטור אלן רוזן. באמת כל אחד מסיפור הלוחות שלו הוא סיפור בפני עצמו, סיפור היסטורי, סיפור אישי, סיפור יהודי. תודה רבה. אנחנו חשבנו להזמין את גברת סולברג גם לכבוד הלוח והמורה וגם כדי שתברך אותנו. אז קודם כל, גברת סופי, אנחנו רוצים לכבד אותך והציבור רוצה לעמוד לכבודך.
Could everyone please stand up in honor of Sophie Solberg? Are there any other Nitzolei Shoah in the audience?
עומדים לכבודך. עומדים לכבודך. עומדים, כולם עומדים מוחאים כפיים, את שומעת? אנחנו ניתן לך את המיקרופון שתברכי את הקהל. תגידי כמה דברי ברכה. גברת סולברג לא שומעת טוב וגם בקושי רואה, אבל היא צלולה ובעלת זיכרון פנומנלי. אפשר עדיין לשאול אותה על כל פרט.
למה לקחתם לי?
אנחנו רוצים שתברכי כעת.
אבל זה לא מונע לשמוע.
נכון. הנה המיקרופון, בבקשה תברכי. את רוצה לעמוד?
אין לי בעיה לעמוד. הבעיה היא בראייה.
מחכים לברכה שלך.
כן, אני מצטערת שלא אמרו לי קודם על התפקיד הזה, אבל אני חושבת שאתם רוכשים לעצמכם מצווה, עצם הלימוד על השואה ועצם הזיכרון של השואה. אני חושבת שזאת מצווה בחזקת זכור מה שעשה לך עמלק בן זמננו, וזה מזכה אתכם בעוד מצווה שלא כל אחד כל יום מקיים אותה, שזה יוסיף לכם חיים טובים ביחד עם שאר המצוות שאנחנו אמורים לקיים או חייבים לקיים. ושזה יזכה את כולם בחיים טובים בבריאות לאורך ימים ושנים.
תודה רבה. תודה רבה.
תודה, תודה רבה רבה, אמן. זה משהו, it's really something to get a bracha from any Shoah survivor. But part of the bracha you all heard was that we should be zocheh for more mitzvot. And coming from a woman whose brilliance and faith are just so wow, that she made a calendar that enabled so many to do mitzvos under the most difficult circumstances. That is quite a remarkable bracha, I think, that we all got tonight. And we should all be blessed. Okay. Oh, she can speak in English too. She didn't realize. But you know what? A bracha in Hebrew is. What is a bracha? בעברית זה יותר חזק, נראה לי. Toda rabba rabba. I think you can see it was not easy for Mrs. Solberg to get here, and we're very, very moved. Toda rabba rabba. Okay. Switching gears just a little now, we're going to have a musical interlude. But I'm from the English department, so there's going to be a story with it. Okay, and speaking of the English department, okay, Zahava and Tohar are two students, second-year students in the English department, and they are going to be playing a very, very special song. in English or Hebrew, whatever, in a different language. I have to, can I show off for just a moment? Okay, they were practicing this afternoon, and some woman just sort of passed through, and she sat down, and she turned out to be from the music department. And she said, wow. And she also told me that apparently, because these two young women are both very gifted with language, and she said that very often musical gift and linguistic gift goes together. I only got half, what can I tell you? But okay, they're going to be playing a song called Mikdash Melech, okay? And I'm going to be reading the story of this song that was, as far as I know, was not written during the Shoah, but the story comes from the Shoah. This is a loose translation from Rav Yisrael Meir Lau's memoir, right? He writes about the song. It was the first night in the slave labor camp of Czestochowa, a Friday night. Naphtali, that's of course Rav Lau's older brother, was at my side trying to keep me warm when suddenly from the end of the barracks we heard a familiar tune from distant times. Chazan Yossel Mandelbaum was singing Mikdash Melech from the Friday night Lecha Dodi prayer. The melody carried echoes from the past, a distant memory of home, allowing me to momentarily forget the horrific events of the recent days. 40 years later, Naphtali Lau was in New York, and he went to visit the Admor of Bobov. I went to school with his daughter, so that's my yichus. Naphtali was sitting with the Admor of Bobov, and he mentioned the story of Yossel Mandelbaum, who had sung the Mikdash Melech stanza from Lecha Dodi on that first Leil Shabbat in Czestochowa. I'm going back to quoting here, thus unknowingly strengthening our spiritual life. Chazan Mandelbaum, says Rav Yisrael Meir Lau, singing Mikdash Melech had returned us to the safe refuge of our family despite the grim conditions in the camp. What a pity that we lost track of him in Buchenwald, Naphtali lamented. We don't even know whether he survived the war. The Rebbe whispered something in the ear of one of his Gabayim. Someone just said, oh boy, oh boy. A few minutes later, the Gabbai reappeared, holding the arm of a diminutive Jew with an impressive white beard. Here he is. Here is Yossel Mandelbaum, announced the Rebbe. He then asked the elderly man, more than 80 years old, to sing the Mikdash Melech stanza from Lecha Dodi. Naphtali listened astounded. Despite the 40 years that had passed and his diminished height, Yossel Mandelbaum's voice had not changed and remained as clear and strong as it was then. As Yossel sang the phrase, "Arise and depart from amid the upheaval," Kumitza'i mitocha hafecha, Naphtali no longer saw the Hasidim of the Rebbe in Brooklyn, but the miserable wretches who sat on the cold, damp ground of the barracks in Czestochowa that Friday night in November 1944 and were strengthened by this song. Okay, so wait, let's hit the lights. My young women put together a little film to go with the song. Light person? Okay, hold on. Now I gotta hit the right button. Okay, Mikdash Melech. And they're also going to be great English teachers. If we can keep them out of the concert halls. They'll be playing one more song afterwards. So, okay. For 12 years, I've been introducing people, and I have to say this was the most difficult introduction that I ever wrote. When we heard of Ori Ansbacher, Hashem Yikom Damad's brutal murder by a Palestinian terrorist less than 2 months ago, we were filled with shock, pain, grief. How could such a thing happen to a beautiful 19-year-old? A girl giving a year of service to her country. A young woman who loved nature, Israel, poetry, life. What many of us did not know about this extraordinary girl was that she was part of an extraordinary family with an extraordinary legacy. Ori was a fourth-generation Shoah survivor. Her great-grandfather, Rabbi Leo Ansbacher, was chief rabbi of a detention camp in Gers, France. In 1941, he oversaw the writing and copying of a handwritten Haggadah and led a Pesach Seder. How could such a thing happen, like Ori's murder? There is no answer, not in this world, to that question. But what should our response be to such a tragedy? How do we remain faithful to Hashem in the face of such cruelty, such evil? To that question, there is an answer. And the answer was given to us, among others, by Ori's great-grandfather, who celebrated the holiday of freedom in the most brutal captivity. Mrs. Shoshana Ansbacher, Ori's grandmother, has very kindly and very graciously agreed to share the legacy of the Gers Haggadah with us tonight. May Ori's memory continue to bring light to our world, and may her family find comfort. Just give me a minute to shrink this. Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I should have offered you water. I'm sorry. That person. Oh, you know what? I can know how to do this. Okay. Okay. Here, just. You don't have to hold it.
No,
just stand
it stays.
Speak and see if
Right.
we hear.
Good evening. First, I would like to explain I am not a Holocaust survivor. The Jews Post notwithstanding.
They say you should stand here so they can see you better. This is the forward, okay?
Okay.
Good.
I spent the war in England, which wasn't a picnic, but far, far away from the Holocaust, just so that there shouldn't be any misunderstanding about that. I'm going to talk about my father-in-law, who was a Holocaust survivor. Although the subject of my talk is Pesach in the camps and the Gers Haggadah, I am widening its scope to include the influence that these events had on my late father-in-law's life after he arrived in Eretz Yisrael. Rabbi Leo Ansbacher was born in 1907 in Frankfurt am Main into an Orthodox family and received a Jewish education. He was a gifted student, and in 1932 he went to Berlin to write his doctoral thesis on the Nazi Party, which was known then as the National Socialist Workers' Party. For this, he visited the archives of the Reichstag, the German parliament, on a daily basis, signing in each time. When the Reichstag was set on fire in 1933, he was afraid that he might be arrested. He told us this personally. And he decided to flee to Belgium. He settled in Brussels and founded the Ansbacher Institute, a Jewish boarding school for boys. In 1934, he married a distant relative, Betty Ansbacher, who gave birth to their son, my husband, Yonah, in 1935. In the meantime, his older brother Max and his family arrived in Brussels, where they were later joined by his parents, and with the exception of Max, they all remained hidden in Brussels during the war. In May 1940, the Germans invaded Belgium, and all foreigners were rounded up. The Jewish men, including Leo and his brother Max, were then separated and loaded into freight trains marked Fifth Column, meaning traitors. They were transported to the internment camp Saint-Cyprien in France, which was run by the French authorities. Internment camps were not concentration camps, but living conditions there were inhuman. 7,500 Jews were imprisoned there in blocks, each block containing 25 huts with 70 to 80 inhabitants each in a small hut. Morale was very low, so a committee named the Central Assistance Committee was appointed, consisting of Rabbi Leo Ansbacher, his brother Max, Ludwig Zuckermann, and Dr. Siegfried Rothschild. They started organizing activities to help the inmates and raise their spirits. One day, a well-known rabbi died in the camp, and his followers wanted to bury him in the Jewish cemetery of Perpignan. The head of the community there, a Mr. Lehman, made the arrangements, and also at the same time gave Rabbi Ansbacher a Torah scroll he had brought from Poland and a shofar, which was served them on Rosh Hashanah. Rabbi Ansbacher had been looking for a shofar all the time, and here he was given a gift. I would like to quote Ari Abrahamson, who reached Saint-Cyprien from Belgium. The long freight trains dragged along for 51 hours from Bruges to the camp on the Spanish-Catalan border. The snow covered the Pyrenees on the one side, and on the other side, separated only by 5 rows of barbed wire, was the Mediterranean Sea. Our tar-papered barracks poorly protected us from the cold wind, rain and sandstorms. We slept on the bare ground, and facilities were non-existent. Religious men gathered in one of the barracks for Kabbalat Shabbat. With few sidurs available, we followed the Baal Tfilah word by word. Then our Baal Tfilah, young Rabbi Leo Ansbacher from Frankfurt, pulled out 2 thin slices of bread and started to say Kiddush. Later, Rabbi Ansbacher hid 2 young boys to save them from deportation. I still see him with a small Sefer Torah strapped to his back, marching in front of thousands of Jews, fleeing to higher ground before the flood and tidal waves of the Mediterranean Sea on Chol HaMoed Sukkot. Rabbi Ansbacher was even able to establish a small yeshiva in one of the barracks, which was named Yeshivat B'nai Barak. In October 1940, the Jewish inmates of Saint-Cyprien were sent to the Gurs internment camp. 18,000 internees of all ages were housed in small huts, 70 to 80 people again per hut. About 13,000 were Jewish, and the men and women were housed separately. Water taps and primitive toilets were outside, and people would wait in long queues to use them. Dysentery and typhus were rife. Hunger and poor health led to the death of 25 inmates daily in the winters of 1940 and 41. The American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee, known as the Joint, raised money, which was passed on to the Christian Quakers in America, to purchase food, clothing, blankets, medicines, and disinfectants for distribution in the camps in the southern states. Soon after his arrival, Rabbi Ansbacher wrote a letter to the Jewish community in Tangiers. There are 13,000 internees in the camp, wrote Rabbi Ansbacher, ranging in age from 1 month to 100 years. Yesterday we buried 17 people, mostly victims of the camp disease, dysentery. we lack one of the principal weapons to fight this disease, cocoa. As we also lack oats, and rice and flour are strictly rationed, we can do practically nothing in the face of this disease, fatal to the old and feeble. Even after the crisis is over, we are powerless to give them the food necessary to strengthen them. He was a very practical person, my father-in-law. I therefore beg you to send us as much cocoa as you can get. We shall be able to do miracles here with that beverage, and many lives will be saved. The shortage of fat is also great, so that it would be extremely useful if cheese and sardines or other fish in oil could be sent us. People are taking some interest in us, it is true, but distress and despair are such that any sort of aid is merely a drop in the ocean. The inmates of Gurs, including rabbis, artists, professors, doctors, nurses, craftsmen, teachers, social workers, musicians, and administrators, set up activities for the camp's inhabitants. They arranged religious services, various courses, and health services to ensure that the inmates would receive both spiritual and physical care and also take part in social activities. Leo Ansbacher received a laissez-passer to move freely in the camp. There was a hospital at the camp's entrance, together with a rabbinical and social services center. They set up a committee to meet once a week to discuss ways of alleviating hunger, distribute clothes, give talks and courses. Rabbi Deutsch, the rabbi of the Southern France community, which was still free, was a great assistance here. At the beginning of 1941, Ludwig Arieh Zuckerman began writing the Gurs Haggadah by hand in print letters. He wrote from memory and did not complete it because there was a shortage of paper. The songs were transliterated into Latin letters and typed to save time. They were then printed in Toulouse and were distributed for use on Seder night. Rabbi Kappel of Toulouse managed to supply about 10,000 kilograms of flour to bake matzot. The Leil HaSeder, I'm sorry, I have a problem with the light here. Thank you. The Leil HaSeder was held, and the stenciled Haggadah was distributed to participants. In addition, permission was granted to hold prayers outside the camp on the last day of Passover. After the Yizkor prayer, Rabbi Ansbacher gave a sermon to the many inmates who attended. Later, one of the artists in the camp, Fritz Schleifer, painted 2 watercolors of the event, showing the large audience and Rabbi Ansbacher on a podium above them speaking. Fritz was later sent to Auschwitz and died there in 1942. A copy of one of the paintings can be seen at Yad Vashem, and they both appear in the Haggadah, the Gurs Haggadah, printed in 1999. At about the same time, the Menorah Girls' Youth Movement was established at the initiative of Mrs. Andre Salomon, who wanted the young girls to have their own activities. Some of them hardly knew about their Jewish roots. They received a small area in one of the barracks and started meeting a few times a week with Rabbi Ansbacher. Most of them could not read Hebrew letters, so he began teaching them prayers and melodies. They would also meet after the Friday night meal, and he would speak about the weekly Torah portion. They dreamt about leaving the camp, going to Eretz Israel, and joining a kibbutz. The French camp officer encouraged the group so that he could show how there were activities for the youth of the camp. The following year, the youth counselor told Rabbi Ansbacher that the group might not have time for their usual activities. He told them that he understood, and soon enough the reason became clear. The girls had prepared a performance. They sang in Yiddish, with 1 or 2 singing in Hebrew, and the audience was so moved that there was hardly a dry eye left in the audience. Afterwards, the girls went around the camp to bring some pleasure to the ill, the weak, and the old. A few weeks later, it became clear that they would not be able to continue, because although Gurs was not a concentration camp, food intended for the camp often did not arrive. There was a black market in food, and somehow people tried to find money to buy. The medical treatment in the camp was very poor. Several French doctors were disgraced to their profession. They operated without anesthetics and treated the women in particular in ways that do not bear describing. From the summer of 1942 until the spring of 1943, the camp gradually emptied out. The Jews did not know when or where they were being sent, and orders would only come at the last moment. There were some Frenchmen who tried to help hide Jews, but the numbers were tiny. Most inmates, with the knowledge of the French government, were escorted by policemen to Drancy and from there to Auschwitz. I quote from Rabbi Ansbacher's testimony. The efforts to save people on the list from being transported led to one of the hardest decisions of my life. If I took someone off the list, someone else would have to take his place. We did not know to where people were being transported, but we knew it was bad. Mrs. Rita Rothschild, who was a representative of one of the Jewish organizations, came and told me that I should not stay in the camp and that I ought to leave immediately. My wife was staying in the area, and arrangements were made for us to meet. They fled on Motzei Shabbat, Parshat Vayechi, and reached Spain 1 week later. The hike over the Pyrenees was very difficult, and on the way, they and their guide had to hide from the Germans. They arrived at their first stop in Spain on Shabbat Parshat Shmot, tired out, and the following day continued until they reached Pamplona in northern Spain. There they waited in a long line and were eventually taken to the local jail. Betty remained there 3 to 4 days, and Leo was there for 2 weeks. They afterwards found out that the joint organization had paid for their expenses. They were supplied with certificates for entry into Eretz Israel, and in 1944 arrived there by boat. Their son was reunited with them in 1945. The family settled in Tel Aviv, and Rabbi Ansbacher found work teaching at the Tel Ranan school in Bnei Brak, where his son learned for a short time. His son remembers Avigdor Bar Yehuda, also a pupil there, who later became Ori's grandfather on her mother's side of the family. At the time, of course, they had no idea that they would have grandchildren in common. Afterwards, Rabbi Ansbacher taught at the Zeitlin Religious High School in Tel Aviv. We still meet former pupils who remember him with admiration and also recall his modesty. He was later appointed rabbi of the Ichud Shivat Zion congregation in Ben Yehuda Street and was active in fundraising to build a permanent synagogue. He continued assisting people as he had during his years in the internment camps, and some of his activities were well before their time. He officiated at thousands of weddings, and each couple would be invited for a series of talks before the ceremony, something which is typical today but was not usual at the time. I found an article written by Dr. Ehud Lev in 1999, after the Gur's Haggadah was published and after Rabbi Ansbacher's death. He and his future wife chose Rabbi Ansbacher to carry out the wedding ceremony. When they met him at his home for the first talk, Rabbi Ansbacher looked at him and said, "I have met you before." Ehud told him that he had arrived in Israel only 1 year earlier and seldom came to Tel Aviv. Rabbi Ansbacher took another long look and then asked, "Were you in Gurs?" 20 years after Rabbi Ansbacher and the 6-year-old Ehud Lev met in Gurs, Ehud and his fiancée were married by Rabbi Ansbacher. Ehud Lev also participated in preparing the publication of the Gur's Haggadah. He died in 2018, last year. Rabbi Ansbacher was also active in Kiruv, welcoming visitors and tourists to the synagogue and encouraging exchanges of ideas between people with different opinions, also well before this became popular. Rabbi Ansbacher died in 1998, and in the following year, 2 great-grandsons, both named after him, were born. The first, Yehuda Ansbacher, had his Brit on the Bimah, where his great-grandfather spoke to his congregation. The second, Ro'i Yehuda Sarosi, had his Brit on Tisha B'Av of the same year. Both are now studying at Yeshiva and will enlist in the army next year. On the last day of the year that Rabbi Ansbacher died, his great-granddaughter Ori was born. Ori, in her 19 years, touched many people deeply, and after her death was a model for thousands more. Ori, with her concern for others and her dedication, directly continued her great-grandfather's path. Yehi Zichra Baruch.
Everybody stand for a moment. A special thank you for Mrs. Ansbacher. We can all see this was not an easy thing for her to do, and we really appreciate it. And we hope that tonight will be yet another point of light that Ori's memory has been bringing to our people. Your family should be comforted. Mrs. Ansbacher's son is here. Does he want to say something, address us, say something? Yeah? No? Okay. Wow. Okay. Okay, got to catch my breath a little bit here. Okay. Okay. Well, we have one more speaker here. Tough act to follow. Okay. I mentioned that Dr. Rosen is an old friend of mine. Rabbi Walk, who I just met 2 hours ago, I feel he's like my friend too, as I think do many of us here in the audience. I know you, of course, through your weekly walk through the Parsha in Torah Tidbits, right? That's, yeah. Rabbi Walk has been involved in, you know what, but before I forget, I don't know if you saw that we do have these pictures that, can you see it? Should we lower the lights? Can you lower the light just for a minute? Okay, let's go just back for a minute for the Ansbacher Haggadah. That's the handwritten Haggadah. Right, a page from the handwritten Haggadah, and that's the picture, the drawing that Mrs. Ansbach talked about. Where is it now? It's in Yad Vashem now?
It is in Yad Vashem.
It's in.
There's also a copy of the Haggadah.
And where's the original of the Haggadah? Is it? They don't. Okay, lights back on. Thank you. Okay, so Rabbi Walk has been involved in Jewish kiruv and education since his college days. And I'm going to apologize because I'm sure you've heard the joke about walking the walk, talking the talk a million times. We will make it 1,000,001 here. Here to talk the talk is Rabbi Walk. Okay, now, is your stuff here?
I'll take it.
Okay.
Yeah. While I'm setting myself up, I'll begin by first of all thanking you very, very much, Dr. Zitter, and thank you, Professor Katz, and Rebbetzin Farbstein. She's moved. Okay. Thank you very, very much for inviting me. Thank you all for coming. What I'm going to do this evening is a little bit different. I'm going to really be talking about after the show more than anything else, and it will include. That's not good. escape from that. That's not what I was going to show. Okay. But Mazel Tov, true. Okay. And I should make this full screen. Okay. First of all, I just want to make two very, very quick observations. When Mrs. Farbstein was speaking before, she was talking about we're coming up to Parshas HaChodesh, and a lot of what I'm going to say sort of relates to a famous vort on that idea by the Sfat Emet, by the Gira Rebbe, who said, don't say HaChodesh Hazeh Lochem, say HaChidush Hazeh Lochem. And really, what we're talking about on the Chagim and on what happens after the Shoah is Hitchadshut. And that's what we need. We need this continued renewal. And I want to say how I found out about the fact that you can renew. And I learned it very quickly from someone who was perhaps amongst the greatest, if not the greatest, at this concept of Hitchadshut after the Shoah. And the way I met him was very, very weird, and I guess it has something to do with my name, perhaps. What happened was on November 15th, 1974, I was working for NCSY, and I was a regional director in New Jersey, and we had that Shabbat, a Shabbaton, in Jersey City. And I knew that we were going to separate the crowd by gender. I didn't realize that we were going to separate the screens by gender, but I'm gonna only do it on this screen because the studies have shown that men can read maps better than women. So you guys are on your own, and I'm gonna show what I'm talking about on this map. And it was Friday afternoon, November 15th, 1974, and I was driving just to show how long ago this was, a Pontiac, down New York's West Side Highway, and the car died. And Shabbat was very early, and we had to pull the car to the side of the road. No cell phones, right? Remember 1974? Well, not the girls in the back, but the rest of us remember 1974. No cell phones. So one of the three of us in the car had to run to Riverside Drive to find a payphone to call, and he made two phone calls. One phone call was to a towing service. They got there just about half an hour before Shabbat. We had to wait a long time. The second phone call was to Rabbi Riskin. Rabbi Riskin was the rabbi then at 69th Street of Lincoln Square Synagogue, and he said, we need meals for tonight. And Rabbi Riskin came through. Of course, they towed us to 50th Street. We then walked up to 69th Street, where Lincoln Square Synagogue was. Rabbi Riskin told us where we were eating supper, and he said, of course, you're staying over for Shabbat. And we said, no, we're not. We have a Shabbaton to run in Jersey City. So we went to 72nd Street. I don't know how many people know Rabbi Paul Friedman, who lives in the Super Soul building on the corner of Agron and Melech George, upstairs there, one of the eyesores of Jerusalem. But anyways, that's the old joke about the Hilton. You stay there because you don't have to look at the building. You look out the window. But anyways, so we ate supper at 72nd Street, and then we decided how are we going to get to Jersey City. So we walked down from 72nd Street, which is right there. We walked down to the Lincoln Tunnel. And we thought they'd let us through the Lincoln Tunnel because Jersey City is right there on the other side of the Lincoln Tunnel. And it would have been a hop, skip, and a jump to get there. The cops stopped us about 100 feet into the tunnel. There's a little sidewalk there. And they said, no way. So we had to walk all the way up Riverside Drive until the GW Bridge. Then we crossed the GW Bridge, and then we went all the way down on the Jersey side. And we're going, and we're going, and we're going. And it gets to be about 11 o'clock. We've been walking for about 4 hours already. We left the Friedmans at about 7, so about 11 o'clock. And it was cold, and we were thirsty, and we needed Shiratim. So And it was in an area where everybody was Dovrei Svardit, but not Svardim. It was a Hispanic area. It's called West New York, right near Union, and we didn't know what to do. And what happened was, and how do I do this to get to the next picture? What do I do to get next? I have to shrink it? I have to shrink it and go all the way back? Okay. Okay, here we go. So we're walking down and we get to this building, which is at 3400 New York Avenue in West New York. And you can see it was a dilapidated, it's been nicely fixed up in the last few years. And it was really a dilapidated building at that time. And we see on the front door, it says Jewish Community Center. It had been a YMHA, those who remember that. And we went inside, it was open. And we said, what do we got to lose? The only building, that looked halfway Jewish. So we go inside, and we can see upstairs there are lights. On the second floor, there were apartments for Kolel lights. And we get to the third floor, and we look at this huge room, and it was a gym. I don't know how many of you remember that's the way they built YMHAs and JCCs in the old days. The top floor was a room that was multi-purpose, Ulam Rav Tachliti, that was for the purpose of basketball, but now all sorts of things. There's a stage, and we could see a stage in the front, and we could see a basketball hoop that was up against the ceiling, and we can hear Zmiris being sung. And we thought we were like this, we thought we were in the middle of a Hasidic story. We had no idea what's going on. And we go inside, and there is a long table with Hasidim. And at the head of the table is... Why is it doing that? Go away. Why is it doing that? Okay, so anyways, sitting at the head of the table, wearing a gold bekisha, is this gentleman, okay, who of course is the Klausenberg Rebbe, the Sanzer Rebbe. And what happens is we're standing there, and he sends one of the Hasidim over to us, and we had a tremendous problem. First of all, we couldn't speak Spanish on the street, and we couldn't speak Yiddish in the building. And it's like, we were really having troubles. Me and one other guy, one stayed in New York and to pick up the car, Motzei Shabbat. And we with me and this other guy, I won't mention his name because it might be Lashon Hara, because he's almost as crazy as I am. And so we're doing our best to communicate with this Hasid about our situation. Number one, we needed bathrooms. And then he gave us, soda to drink. And he comes back and he says, the Rebbe says you have to spend Shabbos here. And so we said, we can't. We have to get to Jersey City because we're running a Shabbaton. We have teenagers who are not dati, and we're making Shabbat for them. We really have to get there. And he goes back to this message with the Rebbe, and he says, the Rebbe wants to meet you. Which he was very surprised at, and so were we, okay? And so we go in, and the Rebbe's not very tall. Both of us, the other guy that was with me is actually taller than I am. And we're, this person is doing his best to speak a little English back and forth. And the Rebbe gives us a bracha, labriut. The Rebbe gives us a bracha. And he says, may you be matzliach in your efforts. And he says, with tremendous hitlahavut. I mean, we couldn't really understand what he was saying, but we could definitely see the devotion and the love on his face. And he says, Shabbos makes Jews. And thinking to my own background, because I come from a not observant home, and I knew it was true. And he said that he learned it in the war. And that really, really inspired us. And we left, we made it to the Shabbaton, and it was wonderful Shabbos. And then Motzi Shabbos, we went back to see if it was really there and wasn't a dream. It really was there, and it's still there. The Rebbe continued to visit there many, many times. And it was just an amazing experience. And now comes the tremendous embarrassment. I had no idea who this was. It was not part of my background, at YU, in coming from Malden High School, Malden, Massachusetts. I had no idea who the Rebbe was. Baruch Hashem was very easy to find out, and I became very immediately amazed. I'm not going to go through his life. I want to go through a couple of his Torahs with you very quickly in a couple of minutes. You can look up his life. He was born in 1905. He died in 1994. All of that stuff is fascinating. He started the Klausenberg Sanz Chassidut. He was charismatic. Everyone loved him. He started a Chassidut that had thousands of adherents by the time the war began. And he had a wife named Hannah and 11 children. Most of his Hasidim and all of his family died in the war. After the war, he said, before the war, he had 150 living relatives, and he was the last one standing. And you'd think that might break a man. There are tremendous stories about him in the camps. I'm not telling those stories tonight. You can find them online. There are books. They're wonderful. Read them. Do not miss them. However, after the war, he started a new life, Hitchadshut. And in this new life, he taught an amazing number of ideas, and a number of those ideas were specifically tied to Chagim and to the calendar. And that's what I wanted to very, very quickly share with you this evening, that first Yom Kippur, after the war, he was in I know I'm going to mispronounce it, the foreign walled DP camp, displaced persons camp, and he was, of course, running the davening there, that Yom Kippur, and it was, in many ways, it was a special Yom Kippur.
Sorry, it was in Feldefing. The first Yom Kippur was in Feldefing.
I thought that was the second, but I could have I think the first one was, because this is where he met Eisenhower.
In Feldefing.
Yeah, it was in Feldefing. No, Fernwald is what Eisenhower said. But okay, what? They weren't that far from each other, actually. But yeah, they were right near each other. But I thought there was. I got the years backwards, perhaps. Givert Schmidt, who knows Kiryat Sanz very, very well, and people should know her. She's a resource when you want to visit. So, anyways, that Friday, that Yom Kippur evening, he opens up the Machzor, and he starts to speak to the people there. And he starts to do something fascinating. He starts off doing the Vidua, we all know, but he did it differently. He goes, Oshamnu, with a question mark. Bagadnu, with a question mark. And he goes through all of them. And some of them he stopped and explained. We didn't steal from anyone. Who were we going to steal from in Auschwitz? We didn't betray anyone. We didn't do anything on this list. How can we possibly, with kavanah, read this list? It's not shayach to us. He slams the Machzor closed and says, I can tell you what sin we committed. Every night when we said Hamapel, we prayed that we wouldn't wake up the next morning. And every morning when we woke up and we said Modeh we said it with anger and with rage that we had to face another day. That's our Aveira. We lost hope. We had difficulty making it through the days. That's our Aveira. Everybody, every year, has to look in the machzor and not parrot the viduyim. Everybody has to look at the machzor and figure out which of these viduyim are shayach to me and my life. And then he said, the idea that is everybody's idea this evening, and then the machzor, and then Yom Kippur, and then the rachamim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu can help us go on. And that's the idea that he learned. And that's the idea that he conveyed. And that's why in 1958 he makes Aliyah. He had already started before that building the Kiryat Sanz and the Laniado. We can have another lecture tonight. But the hospital to save people, and he understood that we have to rebuild. And he did it. And I want to just say two things very, very quickly because I'm almost out of time. And it's late. Two things very, very quickly. One thing about Purim and one last idea. He got confused about Purim. How can I be happy on Purim? How can I be happy when I know what's going on in the world? How can I sing and I can dance? And he says, that's why Chazal told us. L'besumei adelo yada ben Baruch Mordechai and Arohaman. You have to get drunk. Because if you don't get drunk, you can't sing. If you don't imbibe, you can't dance. If you're not a little bit shikor, there's no way you can celebrate. Because reality that we see around us, the facts that confront us, are quite often an anomaly to the reality. The reality is Hodu Lashem Ki Tov Ki Liolam Chasdo. That's truth. But the world doesn't always reflect that. And we sometimes need a little help on avoiding the truth. And that's what Purim teaches us. And that's what we have to remember. That sometimes what the world is saying, sometimes what the headlines blare are not Ki Liolam Chasdo. And that's because we are stuck in an anomaly that we have to deal with. But we know, we believe, we have the emunah that HaKadosh Baruch Hu really is in control. And Ki Liolam Chasdo is the true reality. When I read this, I thought of the story about Einstein. In 1919, there was an eclipse in the southern hemisphere, and many scientists, physicists went to watch this eclipse because there was going to be if Einstein's general theory of relativity was correct, then, as if I understand what I'm talking about, but okay, if Einstein's general theory of relativity is correct, then behind the blackened sun, we will see Jupiter slightly later than we should have because the light waves will be bent by the gravity of the sun. And so all these scientists were up all night, waiting for word. The next morning, one of the students runs in and wakes up Einstein. And he says, "You're right." Einstein, wiping his eyes, groggily says to him, "Of course I'm right. Why didn't you believe? I showed you the facts. I showed you all the formula. It had to be true." We Jews have to be like Einstein sometimes. Even if the facts don't look right, we know the theory. We know the idea. And we have to live the idea. Sometimes it means ignoring the facts. Very quickly, I have one more minute, and I just want to tell one last story. The last holiday I want to talk about, it's not Purim, okay? It's not Yom Kippur. It's a holiday that not many of his colleagues, the Rebbe's colleagues, celebrated. It's not a holiday that you find in your Art Scroll Siddur by Corinth. But anyways, I don't get a commission, but I'm saying it anyways. And then of course it's Yom Ha'atzmaut. When the Rebbe was making his first trip to Eretz Yisrael, of course it was the early 50s. He's coming by boat, and he stops in London. And in London, he spoke to an audience. I want to get the quote correct, so please forgive me. I'm going to read it from the sheet. Okay. So he gets to London, and in front of the audience, it says, he told them how important it was to live in Eretz Yisrael and make the desert bloom. One of the Hasidic Rabbanim that's there, gets up to him afterwards and he says, weren't you a little bit too Zionistic in your tone? Wasn't there, what happened? I read all of your Torahs before the war. This wasn't what you said. This isn't what you said at all. And he said, I had an awakening during the war, and the awakening was the exact same awakening that Mordechai gave to Esther. Esther wasn't going to do anything in Perek Daled of the Megillah. She wasn't going to do anything. She was going to wait for Chazdei Hashem to take over and take over and control the situation. And Mordechai says to her, yeah, you're right. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will save Klal Yisrael. But who's going to save you? The Jewish nation is always going to survive. Whether or not we will depends on whether or not we get involved, whether or not we do something, whether or not we build Eretz Yisrael. And that's what the Rebbe did. And he has a very proud place here in our Medina. But he should have a very proud place in our hearts. The quotes that I said this evening were from a sefer called Shefa Chayim, an abundance of life. And that's what the Rebbe was doing with the rest of his life. When he rebuilt his Hasidut, when he remarried and had 7 children, when he came to America and started a kollel there, when he did all of these things, he was teaching us how to make life abundant. And that's what we have to remember after all of the horrible stories of the Holocaust. We have to make Shefa Chayim. Thank you so very much for
Okay, I started out by saying that my mother, Allah Shalom, always began by thanking the audience. She really taught us to say thank you. So first of all, I just want to say thank you to all who made this evening possible, especially to Deanie Goldstuff, who does everything, and to all the staff of the Merkaz Limudei HaShoah, without which we would have nothing. Chavi Plitnik especially, I don't think she's here. A huge thank you to all our speakers. We had very different dimensions of our topic. I think that each and every one of them will enhance our Pesach Seder. At least that's my hope. Okay, I'm thanking you, but don't leave yet, because we have one more song. First of all, thank you to Tohar and Zahava. Let's hear it for them. Thank you to Michlala for making this possible, as always. And this is a song that, before I end, there will be my at the end of the song, or in that corner. This is a song that needs no introduction, and that I told them, let's do it at the end. I want everybody to go out humming. So.
My wife commanded me to leave.
Oh, okay.
My wife commanded me to leave.
Oh. Let's hear it for listening to our wives. Yes, yes. Okay, Zahava and Tohar. Oh, you almost forgot. Hold it. All right. Okay, here we go. Let's see. Hold it. We have a PowerPoint again. How do I get out of this? I think I have to get out of each one. Okay, and okay. Do you want it, Deanie? You want to just get the lights over here? Okay, ready? Go.
Yeah.
Wait. My sister just reminded me that I didn't say the 3 words that my mother always said when she finished her talk. Incidentally, my sister's with Art Scroll. You can buy Art Scroll also. Am Yisrael Chai. Pesach Kasher Sameach, and thank you again for coming. If anyone needs rides to Beit Shemesh, we have some people going, and bye. Whoa. Thank you. There we go. I'm a fan of his too. Oh, I read about that. Yes.
He would, this is my phone number.
Uh-huh. Hi. Thank you. I didn't see you here. Oh, thank you. It's got my mother's name on it. It's got to be. Or what is that?
Hi there, it was amazing. Esther had to go to a wedding where? Oh, you're kidding.
So she missed the last speech. She said to tell you that.
Okay. I hope you recorded the whole thing. I take your criticism as a compliment. Thank you for staying for the whole evening. Thank you so much for coming. You're kidding. Always. She gave me a red bag. Yeah, tell her I use it. That is my school bag is the bag she wants to get me.
I never got one.
Wow.
She lives in Moti. She's got a little girl who's about a year and a half, and she's expecting it
the sha'ato.
Sha'ato.
Give her the grease right back.
Do you have any girls here from Hasmonean School and
I know the English department. I'm not with my
Oh, you're not
I
with
guess,
the-
yes, but I don't know the Marco girl just came over to me or British accent could be, but I don't know her first.
Underlying facts are true. If it's serious, you can explain away. It's not that it's
But actually, Lisa Meyer, she was she wrote that he said that he looked over to the
she was the one that they said that she was discriminated against.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but she wrote that when he got the telegram, everything when they did the measurements.
Supposedly there was a student, and I have the name of the student.
Lisa Meyer.
No,
Lisa Meyer.
Who got the telegram?
She said that he said, like you said, of course I'm right, but I'm glad for him. I'm glad for him that he came out of it. Because I was right.
The mattress? But for us, I think that these Really? I taught in Margate. From 1977 to 1993. The people academy went into counting. So I knew language. Yeah, we have Baruch Hashem. Yes, this but that's where you was born in. No, he grew up there. He was now he lives in the suburb of Philly. One of the suburbs, not in the city. No. He installs security units. He's making a living. He's not like he's not a nut shopper like us. Thank God for us. I hope nice to put a face to it. The joke is, I don't know if it was in that article, the joke is, that came home from school Oh, yeah, I do have a phone number. Actually, but sometimes I don't answer my phone. So, but I don't mind giving you my phone number. So don't be surprised.
Email and WhatsApp.
My kids are all WhatsApp. But I find that the easiest. I find that the easiest way because when you have a quiet moment, I try to do it once a day, and then I'll walk 36 at Hot Yoga. Okay, a friend of mine who's a well-known rabbi, his son was had to go into and they put on that's for money. lose my, where'd I put my?